In the dying town of Red Canyon, a lonely gunslinger thought he was just protecting a woman from her father's cruelty. He never imagined she was the one who pulled the trigger that shattered his world 12 years ago. But sometimes the greatest betrayals lead to the most unexpected redemptions. Hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more heart-wrenching tales of love loss and second chances in the Wild West. The stranger who saved a broken town but lost his heart to the woman who killed his wife. The desert wind carved through Red Canyon like a blade, stirring dust devils that danced between the abandoned storefronts and empty promises of a town that time had forgotten. Marcus Kane rode his weathered stallion down what used to be Main Street, his pale blue eyes scanning the skeletal remains of what had once been a thriving silver mining community. The year was 1887, and Red Canyon was dying a slow, painful death. Marcus had seen enough dying towns to recognize the signs. Boarded windows stared back at him like dead eyes. Tumbleweeds rolled past doorways where families once gathered. The silence was so complete it seemed to swallow the sound of his horse's hooves on the hard-packed earth. This was exactly the kind of place where a man could disappear, buy ammunition and ride on without anyone asking questions or remembering his face. But Red Canyon had other plans for Marcus Kane. As he approached the only building that still showed signs of life, a weathered general store with smoke curling from its chimney, Marcus heard voices raised in anger. Through the dust-streaked window, he could see movement inside. 3 men surrounded a woman behind the counter, their postures aggressive, their voices carrying the particular cruelty of men who believed themselves untouchable. Marcus should have kept writing. For 12 years, he had perfected the art of not getting involved, not caring, not feeling. But something about the woman's stance, the way she held her ground despite being outnumbered, the defiant tilt of her chin, struck a chord he thought had been silenced forever. He dismounted and pushed through the door. The bell above jangled, and all 4 heads turned toward him. The woman behind the counter had auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun, revealing a face that was beautiful despite the worry lines etched around her green eyes. She looked to be in her late 20s with the kind of strength that came from surviving things that would break lesser souls. The 3 men were cut from different cloth entirely. Rough, unwashed, with the kind of confidence that came from never facing real consequences. The largest one, a bear of a man with an unkempt black beard, sneered at Marcus. "Stores closed, stranger. Private business." Marcus's voice when it came was quiet as winter morning. "Doesn't look private to me." The bearded man's hand moved toward his gun. "Maybe you didn't hear me right. I said, I heard you fine." Marcus stepped closer, his own hand resting casually on the worn grip of his Colt. "Question is whether you heard the lady say she wanted your business." For a moment, the store held its breath. Marcus could smell the tension, sharp and metallic like blood in the air. He counted heartbeats, measured distances, calculated angles. These men were bullies, not gunfighters. They would be slow, predictable. The woman spoke, her voice steady despite the situation. "Gentlemen, as I told you, I don't have the money Mr. Hatch is looking for. Not today." The bearded man's eyes never left Marcus. "Boss says you got 3 days, Miss Reed. 3 days to come up with what you owe, or—" He let the threat hang in the air like smoke. "Or what?" Marcus asked, his tone conversational. "Or she learns why nobody crosses Mordecai Hatch in this territory." The name hit Marcus like a physical blow, but years of survival had taught him to hide such reactions. Mordecai Hatch. After 12 years of searching, could it really be this simple, this easy? The bearded man mistook Marcus's stillness for hesitation. "Smart man knows when to walk away, stranger." "Lucky for you," Marcus said. "I've never been accused of being smart." What happened next took less than 5 seconds. The bearded man went for his gun. His companions followed suit. Marcus drew his Colt with a fluid motion born of countless hours of practice and more gunfights than he cared to remember. 3 shots, 3 bodies hitting the floor. The acrid smell of gunpowder filled the small store. Marcus holstered his weapon and looked at the woman who stood frozen behind the counter, her face pale, but her eyes alert and calculating. "You hurt?" he asked. She shook her head slowly. "No, thank you." "Don't thank me yet. They'll be back with more." "I know." She studied him with those green eyes, and Marcus had the uncomfortable feeling she was seeing more than he wanted to show. "You're very good with that gun." "Good enough." She came around the counter, stepping carefully over the bodies. She was smaller than she had appeared behind the wooden barrier, but there was nothing fragile about her. Everything about her movements spoke of a woman who had learned to be strong because the alternative was death. "I'm Cassandra Reed," she said, extending her hand. "I own this store, what's left of it." Marcus hesitated before taking her hand. Her grip was firm, calloused from hard work. "Marcus Kane." "Well, Mr. Kane, you've just made yourself an enemy of the most dangerous man in Arizona territory." "Wouldn't be the first time." Cassandra studied him for a long moment, then made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "Can I offer you dinner? It's the least I can do, and besides," she glanced at the bodies on her floor, "I have a feeling we need to talk." Marcus knew he should refuse, should get his ammunition and ride out before more trouble arrived. But something about Cassandra Reed made him want to stay, and that impulse terrified him more than any gunfight ever could. "All right," he heard himself say, "dinner." As the sun set over Red Canyon, painting the sky in shades of red that reminded Marcus of blood and loss, he found himself sitting at a small table in the back room of Cassandra's store. The space was simple but clean, with a few personal touches that spoke of a woman trying to make a home in a place that didn't want to be one. Cassandra had prepared a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and coffee that was stronger than most whiskey Marcus had tasted. They ate in companionable silence for a while, both lost in their own thoughts. "You're not from around here," Cassandra said finally. "No." "Where are you from, here and there?" She smiled, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked genuinely amused. "You're not much for conversation, are you, Mr. Kane?" "Conversation tends to lead to involvement. Involvement leads to complications. And you don't like complications." "I used to think I didn't." There was something in his voice that made her look up from her plate, really look at him. In the lamplight, she could see the lines around his eyes, the way his shoulders carried invisible weight. This was a man who had loved and lost, who had built walls around his heart and forgotten how to tear them down. "What changed your mind?" she asked gently. Marcus met her gaze and felt something shift inside his chest, like ice breaking up on a frozen river. "I'm not sure yet." A sound from the front of the store made them both freeze. Footsteps on the wooden porch, slow and deliberate. Marcus was on his feet instantly, his hand on his gun. "Stay back," he whispered. But Cassandra was already moving, pulling a shotgun from behind the store counter with practiced ease. "This is my home, Mr. Kane. I don't hide in my own home." The door opened and a small figure stepped inside. A boy, maybe 12 years old, with sandy brown hair and eyes that had seen too much for his age. He looked from the bodies on the floor to Marcus and Cassandra, showing no surprise at the carnage. "They're dead," he observed matter-of-factly. "Yes, Tommy," Cassandra said, lowering the shotgun. "Mr. Kane here dealt with them." The boy Tommy studied Marcus with the same calculating gaze Cassandra had used. "You're fast." "Fast enough. Faster than my pa was, I reckon. He wasn't fast enough when they came for him." Marcus felt his chest tighten. Another orphan, another child left alone by violence and greed. The West was full of them, and each one was a reminder of what he had lost. "Tommy lives with me," Cassandra explained, her voice soft. "His father was, well, let's just say Mordecai Hatch doesn't tolerate opposition to his business interests, which are land, water rights, anything that can be bought, sold, or stolen." Cassandra's voice hardened. "He owns everything in Red Canyon except this store, and he wants that too." Marcus looked around the small space, seeing it with new eyes. This wasn't just a business to Cassandra. It was a fortress, the last bastion of independence in a town under siege. "Why don't you leave?" he asked. "Take the boy and start over somewhere else." Cassandra and Tommy exchanged a look that spoke of shared secrets and old pain. "Because running away doesn't solve anything," Cassandra said finally. "Sometimes you have to stand and fight even when the odds are against you." "Especially when the odds are against you," Tommy added, his young voice carrying surprising steel. Marcus found himself smiling for the first time in months. These two had spirit, courage, the kind of determination that reminded him of what he used to believe in before the world taught him that courage got good people killed. "Besides," Cassandra continued, "Mordecai Hatch has something that belongs to me, something I intend to get back." "What's that?" Cassandra was quiet for so long that Marcus wondered if she was going to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "The truth." Before Marcus could ask what she meant, they heard riders approaching. Many riders coming fast and angry. Marcus moved to the window and peered through a gap in the boards. At least 8 men, all armed, all looking for blood. "Back door," he asked. "Yes, but they'll have it covered by now." Cassandra checked her shotgun, her movements efficient and practiced. "Besides, I told you, I don't run." Tommy had produced a small revolver from somewhere and was checking the cylinder with the competence of a child who had grown up surrounded by violence. "Well then," Marcus said, drawing his Colt and checking his ammunition, "I guess we make our stand here." As the riders surrounded the store, their leader's voice cut through the night like a blade. "Cassandra Reed, send out the stranger and maybe we'll let you and the boy live." Cassandra called back without hesitation. "Tell Mr. Hatch that if he wants Mr. Kane, he can come and take him himself." The response was immediate. Gunfire erupted from all sides, bullets splintering wood and shattering glass. Marcus and Cassandra took cover behind overturned tables, returning fire when they could find targets. In the chaos of the gunfight, Marcus noticed something that chilled his blood. Tommy wasn't cowering like any normal child would. Instead, he moved with the calm efficiency of someone who had been in similar situations before. This boy had been raised by violence, shaped by it, and that realization made Marcus's chest burn with familiar rage. "How long has this been going on?" Marcus shouted over the gunfire. 2 years, Cassandra replied, squeezing off another shot. Ever since Tommy's father died, the pieces began to fall into place in Marcus's mind. A grieving woman taking in an orphaned boy, a powerful man trying to drive them out, a secret worth fighting for. But there was something else, something in the way Cassandra looked at Tommy and the way the boy trusted her completely, despite his wariness of strangers. They weren't just guardian and ward. They were family bound together by something deeper than circumstances. The gunfight lasted 20 minutes before the attackers withdrew, frustrated by their inability to get clean shots. As silence settled over the store, once again Marcus found himself studying his unlikely allies. Cassandra was reloading her shotgun with steady hands. Her auburn hair had come loose from its bun and now framed her face in wild curls. There was something beautiful about her in that moment, something fierce and untamed that called to a part of Marcus he had thought was dead. Tommy was methodically counting his remaining ammunition, his young face serious and focused. When he looked up and caught Marcus watching him, he smiled, the first genuine smile Marcus had seen from the boy. "You're all right, Mr. Kane," Tommy said. "Most folks would have run by now. Most folks are smarter than I am." "Maybe," Cassandra said, looking at Marcus with an expression he couldn't read. "Or maybe you're exactly where you're supposed to be." Something in her voice made Marcus look at her more carefully. There was a weight to her words, a significance he was only beginning to understand. "Miss Reed," he said slowly, "is there something you're not telling me?" Cassandra set down her shotgun and walked to the window, peering out at the darkness where their enemies waited. When she turned back, her green eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Mr. Kane, what I'm about to tell you might make you want to leave, might make you hate me, but you have a right to know why those men are really here, and why I—" She took a shaky breath. "Why I knew who you were the moment you walked through that door." Marcus felt his world tilt slightly. "You knew me. I knew your name. I knew your face from the wanted posters. And I knew that if I was going to have any chance of getting justice for what Mordecai Hatch did to my family, I needed someone like you. Someone like me. Someone with nothing left to lose and everything to gain from seeing Mordecai Hatch dead." The silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Tommy looked from Cassandra to Marcus, sensing the shift in the room's atmosphere. "Miss Reed," Marcus said carefully, "what exactly are you asking me?" Cassandra walked to a small wooden box on the mantel and withdrew a faded photograph. She handed it to Marcus, and when he looked at it, his breath caught in his throat. The photograph showed a younger Cassandra standing next to a man in his 50s. The man had the same eyes as Cassandra, the same strong jawline. But there was something else about him, something familiar that made Marcus's blood run cold. "That's my father," Cassandra said quietly. "Mordecai Hatch." Marcus stared at the photograph, his mind reeling. The woman he had been drawn to, the woman whose strength and courage reminded him of everything good he had lost, was the daughter of his greatest enemy. "I left home when I was 16. Cassandra continued, her voice steady despite the tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. "I couldn't watch what he was becoming, couldn't be part of the violence and cruelty. I changed my name, made my own way, tried to forget where I came from. But you came back. I came back because I learned something that changed everything. Something about a job my father ordered 12 years ago. A job that went wrong and destroyed an innocent family. Marcus's hand tightened on the photograph. What kind of job? Cassandra looked at Tommy, who nodded encouragingly. Whatever secret she was about to reveal, the boy already knew it. A robbery, she said. A wealthy merchant's wagon was supposed to be empty, except for silver. But there was a family traveling with the wagon. A man, his wife, and their infant son. The photograph fell from Marcus's numb fingers. Sarah. Emma. The wagon they had been traveling in when the bandits attacked. The silver he had been transporting for the bank. The orders were to take the silver and leave no witnesses, Cassandra whispered. But something went wrong. The family fought back. And in the chaos, she couldn't finish the sentence. Marcus found his voice, though it sounded like someone else speaking. In the chaos, the woman and child were killed. Yes. And the man, he survived. Wounded, broken, but alive. My father's men left him for dead, but he lived long enough to identify the leader of the gang, a man named Mordecai Hatch. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the weight of 12 years of grief and rage settling on his shoulders like a familiar coat. How do you know all this? Because, Cassandra said, her voice breaking. I was there. The words hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Marcus opened his eyes and looked at this woman who had fed him, fought beside him, made him feel human again, for the first time in over a decade. You were part of the gang that killed my family. I was 16 years old and terrified of my father. He forced me to come along, said it was time I learned the family business. I begged him not to make me go, but she shook her head. Mordecai Hatch doesn't accept refusal, not even from his own daughter. Marcus stood slowly, his hand moving instinctively toward his gun. But as he looked at Cassandra, really looked at her, he saw something that stopped him cold. This woman was in agony. The secret she had carried for 12 years was eating her alive, and the confession was costing her everything she had left. I've spent every day since then trying to make amends, she whispered. I've dedicated my life to helping people my father hurt. Tommy's father, others like him. And when I heard that Marcus Kane was still alive, still hunting the men who destroyed his family, I knew what I had to do. Which was, give you what you've been searching for, a chance at Mordecai Hatch. But first, she looked at Tommy, and suddenly Marcus understood why the boy meant so much to her, why she would risk everything to protect him. Tommy isn't just an orphan you took in, Marcus said quietly. Cassandra shook her head, tears streaming down her face. Tell him, Tommy. The boy looked up at Marcus with eyes that were suddenly heartbreakingly familiar. Eyes the same pale blue as Marcus's own. Eyes like Sarah's had been. My name isn't Tommy Reed, the boy said, his young voice steady and sure. It's Thomas Kane, and you're my father. The world stopped. Marcus stared at the boy who had been dead for 12 years, who had grown up without knowing his father's name, who had been raised by the daughter of the man who destroyed their family. The irony was so complete, so devastating, that Marcus almost laughed. Instead, he dropped to his knees. Tommy, Thomas, his son, his boy, who should have died but somehow lived, walked over and placed a small hand on Marcus's shoulder. It's all right, Pa, he said. Cassie told me you didn't know. Told me you've been looking for us all this time. Marcus looked up at Cassandra through his tears. How? I found him in the wreckage after my father's men rode away. He was unconscious, badly hurt, but alive. I couldn't leave him to die. So I took him. Told my father he was dead like the others. I've been raising him ever since, waiting for the day when I could find you and make things right. Make things right. Marcus stood, his emotions warring between joy at finding his son alive and rage at the deception. You kept my son from me for 12 years. To keep him safe, Cassandra shot back, her own anger flaring. Do you think Mordecai Hatch would have let him live if he knew Thomas had survived? Do you think my father's enemies wouldn't have used him against you? I kept him hidden, kept him safe until I could find a way to reunite you that wouldn't get him killed. Marcus wanted to be angry, wanted to hate her for the years stolen from him, for the childhood he had missed, for the pain of believing his son was dead. But looking at Thomas, Looking at the strong, brave, intelligent young man he had become, Marcus could see that Cassandra had done more than keep him alive. She had loved him, raised him, given him everything a mother could give. "She saved me, Pa," Thomas said quietly. "In every way that matters, she saved me." Marcus looked at his son, then at Cassandra, and felt something shift inside his chest. The ice that had frozen his heart for 12 years began to crack, letting in warmth and light, and possibilities he had forgotten existed. "What now?" he asked. Cassandra wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders, becoming once again the strong woman who had faced down 3 gunmen without flinching. "Now," she said, "we finish what we started. Mordecai Hatch has ruled this territory through fear and violence for too long. It's time someone stood up to him." "You mean it's time someone killed him?" "Yes." Marcus nodded slowly. After 12 years of searching, his enemy was finally within reach. But now it wasn't just about revenge. Now it was about protecting the family he had found again, about giving Thomas and Cassandra a chance at the life they deserved. "All right," he said, "but we do this my way, together." As dawn broke over Red Canyon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, 3 people stood in the ruins of a general store and planned the end of Mordecai Hatch's reign of terror. A father and son reunited by fate, a woman seeking redemption for sins she committed as a child, and between them a love story written in blood and bullets lost and hope that would either save them all or destroy them completely. The war for Red Canyon was about to begin. 3 days had passed since the night that changed everything. 3 days of preparation, planning, and slowly learning to be a family again. Marcus watched Thomas practicing with his rifle behind the store, the boy's movements fluid and confident despite his young age. Cassandra had trained him well. Too well, perhaps, for a child who should have been learning letters instead of loading bullets. "He's good," Marcus said, joining Cassandra on the back porch where she was cleaning her shotgun. "He had to be. In my father's territory, weakness is a death sentence." Cassandra's voice carried old pain memories of a childhood spent learning lessons no child should know. Marcus studied her profile in the morning light. The past 3 days had revealed layers to Cassandra Reed that continued to surprise him. She could cook a meal that tasted like home, then clean a rifle with the efficiency of a professional soldier. She could comfort Thomas after a nightmare about the attack that killed his mother, then calmly discuss the best way to approach Mordecai Hatch's stronghold. "Tell me about him," Marcus said. "Your father. What kind of man are we really facing?" Cassandra was quiet for a long moment, watching Thomas hit target after target with mechanical precision. "Mordecai Hatch wasn't always a monster," she said finally. "When I was very small, before my mother died, he was different. Stern, yes. Hard, but not cruel. The cruelty came later, after she was gone. After he decided that love was a weakness that got people killed." "What happened to your mother?" "Consumption. Slow and painful. She died in his arms, and I think something in him died with her." Cassandra set down her shotgun and looked at Marcus directly. "That doesn't excuse what he became, but it helps explain it." Marcus nodded. He understood how loss could change a man, how grief could twist love into something dark and poisonous. He had felt the same transformation in himself after losing Sarah and Thomas, or thinking he had lost them. "He has 12 men loyal to him," Cassandra continued. "Good fighters, all of them. They stay at his ranch about 10 miles north of town. The place is built like a fortress. High walls, guard towers, only one way in or out. Unless you know the land." "Unless you know the land," she agreed, "which I do." They spent the morning going over every detail of the ranch's layout, every guard post, every weakness in Mordecai's defenses. Cassandra drew maps in the dirt, her memory precise and detailed, despite the years that had passed since she last set foot on her childhood home. "There's something else you need to know," she said, as they finished planning their approach. "Something about the night your family was attacked." Marcus felt his chest tighten. "What about it?" "The orders were specific. Take the silver, kill the man, but leave the woman and child unharmed. They were supposed to be taken back to the ranch." "Why?" Cassandra's voice dropped to a whisper. "Because my father had seen your wife in town earlier that day. He was obsessed with her. Beautiful women have always been his weakness, and Sarah Kane was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen." The rage that flooded Marcus was so sudden and complete that for a moment he couldn't see, couldn't breathe. The idea of Mordecai Hatch looking at Sarah with lustful eyes of planning to take her to make her a prisoner in his twisted fortress was almost more than he could bear. But something went wrong, Cassandra continued quickly. Sarah fought back harder than anyone expected. And in the struggle, she closed her eyes. The gun went off. Whose gun? When Cassandra looked at him, her eyes were filled with 12 years of guilt and self-recrimination. Mine. The admission hung between them like a physical weight. Marcus stared at this woman who had become so important to him, trying to reconcile the gentle soul who had raised his son with the terrified 16-year-old girl who had accidentally killed his wife. I never meant for it to happen, Cassandra whispered. I was trying to help her, trying to protect her from the others. But I was young and scared and clumsy, and when she grabbed for the gun, tears streamed down her face. I've relived that moment every day for 12 years. I see her face in my dreams, Marcus. I see the surprise in her eyes when she realized she was dying. Marcus felt as though he was drowning. Every emotion he had buried for 12 years came flooding back at once. Grief, rage, despair, and underneath it all, a terrible, crushing loneliness that threatened to destroy him. But as he looked at Cassandra broken and weeping with the weight of her confession, he realized something that shocked him to his core. He didn't hate her. By all rights, he should want to strangle her with his bare hands. But looking at the woman who had saved his son, who had dedicated her life to making amends for a mistake made by a terrified child, he felt something else entirely. Forgiveness. Impossible, inexplicable, but real. Cassie, Thomas's voice cut through the tension. The boy had finished his practice and approached without either adult noticing. Now he stood looking at them with worry etched on his young features. Are you telling him about Ma? Marcus's breath caught. You knew? She told me when I was old enough to understand. Told me about the accident, about how sorry she was, about how she's spent every day since trying to make it right. Thomas moved to stand beside Cassandra, his hand finding hers in a gesture of comfort and support. She's been more of a mother to me than most kids ever get, Pa. And if Ma could see how Cassie raised me, how much she loves me, I think she'd forgive her. I think she'd want you to forgive her too. Marcus looked at his son, this wise, compassionate young man who had every right to hate but chose love instead, and felt his heart break open. All the walls he had built and all the ice he had packed around his emotions melted away in an instant. He reached out and pulled both Cassandra and Thomas into his arms, holding them close, as 12 years of pain and anger transformed into something else, something that felt like hope. I forgive you, he whispered into Cassandra's hair. God help me, I forgive you. They held each other as the sun climbed higher over Red Canyon, three broken souls finding in each other what they had lost long ago. A family, fractured and scarred, built on tragedy and mistake, but real nonetheless. The moment was shattered by the sound of approaching horses. Marcus released them and moved to the front window, peering through the boards. What he saw made his blood run cold. Mordecai Hatch himself rode at the head of a column of armed men, his massive frame unmistakable even at a distance. He's here, Marcus said grimly. Cassandra and Thomas joined him at the window. Marcus got his first clear look at his enemy, and the sight burned itself into his memory. Mordecai Hatch was a giant of a man, well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders like a bull and hands that looked capable of crushing a man's skull. His hair was iron gray, his face weathered leather, and his eyes were the coldest thing Marcus had ever seen. Cassandra, Hatch's voice boomed across the distance. I know you're in there, girl. Time to come home. Cassandra stepped onto the porch, her chin raised defiantly. I am home, Father. This is where I belong. Hatch's laugh was like the sound of breaking glass. With these people, with this trash you've surrounded yourself with, you're my daughter Cassandra, my blood. You belong with your family. And these people are my family now, including the man who's been hunting me for 12 years, including Marcus Kane, the merchant I should have killed when I had the chance. Marcus stepped out beside Cassandra, his hand resting on his gun. After 12 years of searching, he was finally face to face with the man who had destroyed his life. Hatch studied him with those cold eyes, and slowly a smile spread across his brutal features. Well, the grieving widower. Tell me, Cain, how does it feel to know that your precious Sarah died begging for mercy? How does it feel to know that her last words were your name? The taunt hit Marcus like a physical blow, but he forced himself to remain steady. This was what Hatch did. He found people's weaknesses and exploited them without mercy. How does it feel to know your own daughter pulled the trigger? Hatch continued, his voice dripping with malicious satisfaction. How does it feel to know that the woman you're protecting is the one who killed your wife? It feels, Marcus said quietly, like justice. Hatch's smile faltered slightly. Justice. Your daughter spent 12 years raising my son, 12 years making sure he grew up safe and strong and good, 12 years trying to atone for something she did as a terrified child following your orders. Marcus stepped closer to the edge of the porch. She paid her debt, Hatch. The only debt left is yours. My debt, Hatch's voice rose to a roar. I owe you nothing. You were a merchant, a nobody. I am Mordecai Hatch. I built this territory with my bare hands. You built it on murder and fear, and now it's time to pay the price. For a long moment, father and daughter, past and present, stared at each other across the dusty street. Then Hatch raised his hand and his men began to dismount and spread out surrounding the store. Last chance, Cassandra, Hatch called. Come with me now, and I'll make your friends' deaths quick. Go to hell, father. I've been there for years, girl. Now I'm taking you with me. The battle began with shocking suddenness. Hatch's men opened fire from multiple positions, their bullets splintering wood and shattering what remained of the store's windows. Marcus, Cassandra, and Thomas took cover and returned fire, but they were vastly outnumbered. The back room, Cassandra shouted over the gunfire. There's a hidden passage that leads to the old mine shaft. They fought their way through the store, dodging bullets and debris. Marcus covered their retreat, his Colt speaking death to any of Hatch's men who tried to follow too closely. But he knew it was only a matter of time before they were overwhelmed. The hidden passage was concealed behind a false wall in Cassandra's bedroom. As they squeezed through the narrow opening, Marcus could hear Hatch's men breaking down the front door. This leads to the mine, Marcus asked as they crawled through the cramped tunnel. To the old silver mine, yes. There are dozens of passages down there. We can lose them in the tunnels and come up behind them. They emerged into a vast underground chamber, lit by shafts of sunlight filtering down through cracks in the roof. The walls were scarred with the tools of long-dead miners, and the air smelled of dust and forgotten dreams. This way, Cassandra whispered, leading them deeper into the maze of tunnels. But as they rounded a corner, they found themselves face to face with three of Hatch's men who had entered the mine from another entrance. The gunfight in the confined space was brutal and deafening. When the smoke cleared, two of Hatch's men were dead, but Thomas had taken a bullet in the shoulder. I'm fine, the boy insisted, as Marcus examined the wound, but his face was pale with shock and blood loss. We need to get him to Doc Phillips, Cassandra said, and walk right into Hatch's arms. He'll have the doctor's office surrounded by now. Cassandra bit her lip, thinking furiously. There's another way. The old mission church on the hill. Father Martinez might help us, and there are medical supplies there. They made their way through the tunnels toward the far side of town, Thomas leaning heavily on Marcus as they walked. The boy had inherited his mother's courage along with her eyes. He never complained, never asked to rest, just gritted his teeth and kept moving. The church was a crumbling adobe structure that had been abandoned for years, but when they approached the back entrance, they found it unlocked. Inside, candlelight flickered before a simple altar, and an elderly priest knelt in prayer. Father Martinez, Cassandra called softly. The priest turned, and Marcus was surprised to see intelligent brown eyes and a weathered face. This was no simple village padre, but a man who had seen the world and chosen to serve in this forgotten place. Cassandra, my child, I wondered when you would come. His gaze took in Thomas's wound and Marcus's guns. Mordecai's men are searching the town. You cannot stay here long. We just need supplies to tend to the boy's wound. Father Martinez nodded and began gathering medical supplies from a cabinet behind the altar. As he worked to clean and bandage Thomas's shoulder, he spoke quietly. Your father is not entirely wrong, you know, about blood calling to blood, about the bonds of family. But he has forgotten that love is stronger than blood. That family is what we choose to make it. Marcus watched the priest's gentle hands tending to his son and felt a deep gratitude. In this place of sanctuary, surrounded by enemies, but safe for the moment, he began to understand something important. Father, he said, would you perform a marriage ceremony? Cassandra looked up from where she was checking their ammunition. Marcus, what are you talking about? I'm talking about making this official, making us a real family before. He couldn't finish the sentence, but they all knew what he meant. Before they went to face Mordecai Hatch in his stronghold. Before some or all of them died. You don't have to do this, Cassandra whispered. Not because you feel guilty, not because you feel you owe me something. Marcus cupped her face in his hands, looking into those green eyes that had become so dear to him. I'm not doing this out of guilt. I'm doing it because I love you. Because you gave me back my son and showed me that my heart isn't as dead as I thought it was. Because if we're going to face whatever comes next, I want to face it as your husband. Tears streamed down Cassandra's face, but she was smiling. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Father Martinez performed the ceremony by candlelight with Thomas serving as witness despite his wound. The vows were simple spoken in the shadow of violence and death, but they were real. When Marcus kissed his new wife, he tasted salt from her tears and hope from her lips. Now, he said, helping Thomas to his feet, let's go end this. They left the church as the sun was setting, painting Red Canyon in shades of blood and gold. Somewhere in the gathering darkness, Mordecai Hatch was waiting with his army of killers. But Marcus Kane no longer rode alone. He had a family again, a reason to live and fight and hope. The final confrontation was coming, and Marcus was ready. The Hatch Ranch sprawled across the valley like a cancer, its high walls and guard towers stark against the star-filled sky. Marcus, Cassandra, and Thomas lay on their bellies at the crest of the ridge, studying their target through Marcus's field glasses. Even with Thomas's wounded shoulder, the boy had insisted on coming along. This is family business, he had said with a determination that reminded Marcus painfully of Sarah. 12 men, Marcus counted, watching the guards patrol the perimeter, maybe more inside the main house. There are, Cassandra confirmed. Father always kept his most trusted men close. She pointed to a section of the wall that looked identical to the rest. There's a hidden gate there built for emergencies. I can get us inside without being seen. Marcus lowered the glasses and studied his wife's face in the moonlight. The words still felt strange in his mind, wife. After 12 years of being alone, of believing he would never love again, the idea of having a partner, a true companion, seemed almost impossible. But here she was, brave, intelligent, carrying her own burden of guilt, but refusing to let it crush her spirit. And somehow, impossibly, she loved him too. Once we're inside, Marcus said, there's no going back. Mordecai won't let us leave alive. Good, Thomas said quietly. His young voice carried a hardness that worried Marcus. He doesn't deserve to live after what he's done. Marcus gripped his son's uninjured shoulder. Thomas, listen to me. What we're about to do, it's not about revenge anymore. It's about justice, about stopping him from hurting anyone else. But revenge will eat you alive if you let it. I know. Thomas met his father's eyes and Marcus saw understanding there. I know, Pa. Cassie taught me that. But sometimes justice and revenge look the same from the outside. The difference is in your heart, Cassandra added softly, in whether you do it to heal the world or to feed your own pain. They made their way down the ridge in silence, moving like ghosts through the scrub brush and scattered boulders. The hidden gate was exactly where Cassandra had remembered it, concealed behind a false section of wall that looked solid but swung open at her touch. Father built it during the Apache troubles, she whispered as they slipped through. He was always paranoid about being trapped. The interior of the ranch was laid out like a small fortress. Outbuildings clustered around a central courtyard with the main house rising like a monument to Mordecai Hatch's ego. Lights burned in several windows, and Marcus could see guards moving between the buildings. The safe is in Father's study, Cassandra breathed into his ear. Second floor corner room. That's where he keeps the evidence of all his crimes, land deeds he stole, death certificates, he forged records of every evil thing he's done for the past 20 years. And if we expose that, the territorial government will have no choice but to act. His own men will turn against him when they realize he's been cheating them too. It was a good plan, better than a straight fight against overwhelming odds. But as they crept across the courtyard, staying in the shadows cast by the buildings, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. His instincts proved correct. They were halfway to the main house when torches blazed to life all around them, turning night into harsh yellow day. Men stepped out from concealment behind every building, every corner, every shadow. At least 20 of them, all armed, all pointed at the three figures frozen in the center of the courtyard. "Welcome home, daughter." Mordecai Hatch emerged from the main house, his massive frame backlit by the doorway. Even at a distance, Marcus could see the cruel satisfaction in his cold eyes. "Did you really think I didn't know about the hidden gate? Did you think I hadn't been watching you plan this little reunion?" Hatch's laugh was like breaking glass. "I've been 3 steps ahead of you since the moment you decided to play hero Cassandra." Marcus's hand moved toward his gun but stopped when he felt the cold muzzle of a rifle pressed against the back of his neck. They were surrounded, outnumbered, caught in the open with nowhere to run. "Clever of you to marry him." Hatch continued strolling toward them with the confidence of a chin who held all the cards. "Nothing like a wedding to make the doomed feel better about their situation." "How did you know about your little ceremony?" "Really, girl, you think Father Martinez hasn't been reporting to me for years? How do you think I've stayed ahead of the territorial marshals for so long?" Marcus felt his world tilt. The priest who had married them, who had seemed so kind and trustworthy, was another of Hatch's spies. The betrayal cut deep not just for himself, but for the faith Thomas had placed in the old man. "Strip them of weapons," Hatch ordered. Rough hands relieved them of their guns, their knives, even Thomas's small boot pistol. They were herded toward the main house like cattle being led to slaughter. The interior of Hatch's home was a monument to violence and greed. The walls were lined with trophy heads of animals and men alike. Stolen artwork hung beside wanted posters of criminals Hatch had killed or absorbed into his organization. It was the lair of a man who had embraced evil so completely that he no longer remembered what good looked like. Hatch settled into a massive chair that looked more like a throne, studying his three captives with the attention of a cat toying with wounded mice. 12 years, he said to Marcus. 12 years you've been hunting me. 12 years of dreams of revenge. Tell me, was it worth it?" Marcus said nothing, but his silence seemed to amuse Hatch. "Strong, silent type. I can see why my daughter finds you attractive. You remind me of myself at your age, before I learned that strength without ruthlessness is just weakness with delusions." "You're nothing like my father," Thomas said suddenly, his young voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Hatch's attention shifted to the boy, and Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. Ah, the miraculous survivor. The boy who should have died with his mother but somehow lived to be raised by my traitorous daughter. "Leave him alone," Cassandra said, stepping protectively in front of Thomas. "Leave him alone." Hatch's voice rose to a roar. "He's a Cain, the son of my enemy, the living reminder of my greatest failure." He leaned forward in his chair, his face twisted with rage. "I should have made sure he was dead 12 years ago." "But you didn't," Thomas said, stepping out from behind Cassandra. "And now I'm here to finish what my father started." The boy's courage in the face of overwhelming odds reminded Marcus so powerfully of Sarah that for a moment he couldn't breathe. This was her son, her legacy, her gift to a world that had tried to break him. "Brave words from a child," Hatch sneered. "Tell me, boy, do you know the whole truth about that night? Do you know that your precious Cassie was the one who pulled the trigger? Do you know that she killed your mother with her own hands?" "I know," Thomas said simply, "and I forgive her because that's what families do. They forgive each other's mistakes and try to be better." Hatch stared at the boy as if he had spoken in a foreign language. Forgiveness is weakness, boy. Forgiveness gets you killed." "No," Marcus said quietly, finding his voice at last. "Forgiveness sets you free. It's hate that kills you, Mordecai. Look at yourself. Look at what you've become. You are already dead inside." For a moment, something flickered in Hatch's eyes. Something that might have been recognition or regret, or the ghost of the man he had been before grief twisted him into a monster. Then it was gone, replaced by the cold calculation Marcus had come to know too well. "Enough," Hatch said, rising from his chair. "I've wasted enough time on sentiment." He drew his gun, a massive Colt that looked like it could stop a charging bull. "Say goodbye to each other. I'm ending this tonight." But as Hatch raised his weapon, the sound of gunfire erupted from the courtyard outside. Shouts, screams, and the thunder of running horses filled the night air. "What the hell?" Hatch began, but his words were cut off as the doors to the room burst open. Sheriff Daniels stood in the doorway, his normally lazy demeanor replaced by grim determination. Behind him came a dozen territorial marshals, their badges gleaming in the lamplight. Mordecai Hatch, Daniels said formally, you're under arrest for murder, robbery, extortion, and conspiracy against the territorial government. Hatch's men in the room reached for their guns, but they were outnumbered and caught by surprise. The marshals had them disarmed and on the ground in seconds. How? Hatch demanded, his face purple with rage. Daniel smiled, and for the first time since Marcus had met him, the sheriff looked truly pleased with himself. Well, Mordecai, it turns out that when you murder a federal judge's brother, the government takes notice. Judge Harrison has been investigating you for months, and when certain evidence came to light, he nodded toward Cassandra. Evidence provided by your own daughter, I might add. Well, let's just say your friends in high places suddenly decided you were too much trouble. Marcus looked at Cassandra in amazement. You've been working with the marshals this whole time. Not the whole time, she admitted. But when I realized what we were up against, I knew we needed help. I've been feeding information to the territorial government for weeks, building a case against him. You betrayed me, Hatch said, his voice filled with wounded disbelief. Your own father. You betrayed yourself, Cassandra replied sadly. You became someone I couldn't love, couldn't follow, couldn't even recognize. The father I remember died with my mother. You're just the monster that took his place. For a moment, Hatch seemed to crumble. The weight of years of crimes, of the emptiness where his heart used to be, seemed to settle on his massive shoulders like a physical burden. Then with the speed of a striking snake, he lunged forward and grabbed Thomas, pressing his gun to the boy's temple. Everyone back, he roared. Back or I kill the boy. The marshals raised their weapons but didn't dare fire. Thomas was too close, the angle too dangerous. One wrong move and Marcus would lose his son all over again. Let him go, Mordecai, Marcus said quietly. You've lost. It's over. It's over when I say it's over. Hatch's voice cracked with desperation and rage. I built this territory. I own these people. I am Mordecai Hatch. You're a broken old man who forgot how to love, Thomas said calmly, showing no fear despite the gun pressed against his head. And that's the saddest thing in the world. Something in the boy's voice and his simple compassion for the monster who was threatening to kill him seemed to reach through Hatch's madness. For just a moment, his grip on the gun loosened. That moment was all Marcus needed. He dove forward, tackling Hatch around the waist and driving him away from Thomas. They crashed to the floor in a tangle of limbs and fury, fighting for control of the gun. Hatch was larger and stronger, but Marcus had 12 years of rage and the desperate strength of a father protecting his child. The gun went off. Both men lay still for a heartbeat, then two. Marcus felt wetness spreading across his chest and thought with strange calm that he was dying. At least Thomas was safe. At least he had found his son again before the end. Then Hatch convulsed beneath him, and blood bubbled from the larger man's lips. The bullet had found its mark, but not in Marcus. Hatch's own weapon had turned against him in the struggle, finding his heart with unerring accuracy. Cassie, Hatch whispered, his cold eyes searching the room until they found his daughter. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. And then Mordecai Hatch, terror of the Arizona territory, died with his daughter's name on his lips and tears on his cheeks. Marcus rolled off the body and into Cassandra's arms, holding her as she wept for the father she had lost long before his death, for the man he might have been if grief hadn't poisoned his heart. Thomas knelt beside them and Marcus pulled his son into the embrace, marveling at the miracle of holding his family again. They had all been broken by the same tragedy, all twisted by the same loss. But somehow, impossibly, they had found their way back to each other. 6 months later, Marcus stood on the porch of their rebuilt store in Red Canyon, watching Thomas practice his letters with the same dedication he had once applied to learning gunfighting. The boy was smart, eager to learn, and determined to be more than the violence that had shaped his early years. Red Canyon was coming back to life. With Hatch's stranglehold broken, new families were moving in, businesses were reopening, and hope was returning to the high desert town. Cassandra had used her inheritance from her father's estate to build a school, and she taught the children every morning before opening the store. Thinking deep thoughts, she asked, joining him on the porch with 2 cups of coffee. Thinking about how strange life is, Marcus replied, accepting the cup gratefully. How the worst thing that ever happened to me led me back to the best thing. Cassandra leaned against him, solid and warm and real. Do you ever regret it, the way things worked out? Marcus considered the question seriously. He thought about Sarah, about the years of grief and rage and emptiness. He thought about the man he had been before tragedy struck and the man he had become after. He thought about the strange twists of fate that had brought him here to this porch with this woman and this boy who had somehow become his world. No, he said finally. I regret the pain. I regret the years we lost. I regret that Sarah and so many others had to die before Hatch was stopped. But I don't regret finding you. I don't regret finding Thomas alive. And I don't regret learning that even broken hearts can heal given enough love and time. Thomas looked up from his writing practice and grinned at them, his young face bright with the kind of joy Marcus had thought lost forever. In that smile, Marcus could see echoes of Sarah, but he could see the future too. A future built not on revenge or grief, but on hope and love and the simple miracle of family. As the sun set over Red Canyon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Marcus Kane sat with his wife and son and felt something he hadn't experienced in 12 years. Peace. The ghosts of the past would always be with them, but they were no longer haunted by them. They had found their way back to the light, back to each other, back to the possibility that even in a harsh and violent world, love could triumph over hate. Red Canyon was home now, and home was wherever they were together, the end.